This is the Tabernacle Podcast with Tim Burgess and me, John Vermilia. What's up, Tim?
John, first I need to know what episode is this?
This is episode number 101.
101. So it's kind of like a primer basic.
Yeah,
Like you take Science 101 or Creative Writing 101 when you get to college.
exactly. It's kind of like we're going back to, we got 100 episodes by the skin of our teeth.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, let's go back and do something primal.
Yeah, I think so. So you asked me a couple of days ago if we might do war stories.
Yes.
Kind of what we're talking about. And war stories, we're talking about the war stories of the travel of the Tabernacle.
That's right.
Since we've been here.
Yes.
Kind of a deal, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the reason I threw out which by the way, our normal host, Brenton Bishop's not here.
Where is
And
Brenton?
so he's apparently doing some type of real life pastor stuff. And so,
okay.
So it was like, well, the show's going to go on. It's not really a show, but this little thing we call the podcast. And the reason I brought up war stories was our history, our collective history, our testimonies as Christians can serve as an encouragement for people.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I were talking before the show, and we got a lot of years here. Combined, you and I together have 39 years.
Mm-hmm.
I've been here 20 years, but it didn't really start till you showed up in my life.
Yeah. You actually had you went in an unprotected little Indiana guy into a belly of a weird beast.
Yes,
and
Northern Michigan.
And you were so disruptive that everybody quit.
Hold on, you're getting too far ahead. You're getting too far ahead.
Yeah.
But Tim's got 19 years, both serving as volunteer and later full-time staff, and has been here ever since. And so, kind of as we go, let me give us the context of why we're even using the term war stories. It's not just reminiscence. Reminiscence?
Yeah.
It's not just two old guys reminiscing.
Yeah.
What it says in Scripture, in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10, a familiar passage to many, it says, "Finally be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places." Now, every Christian is called to put on the armor of God, to be strong in the Lord and to rely on him and his might. But when you go into ministry, whether as a volunteer, like when you get after the mission of making disciples, loving God, loving people, making disciples, that's our vision, or that is our mission statement. And specifically our vision, where we're going after hearts and minds. We're going after souls. That's the change lives part.
Yeah. And
when you engage in that, spiritual warfare becomes even more real. Not that it's not real for everyone. Essentially, this verse is saying we have an enemy who's always working against us. And the enemy specifically doesn't like it when the church gathers, and then when the church scatters to do ministry. And then if you're going to be any type of a staff person or leader, it ramps up even more. And so that's kind of why I was thinking, that's the context, is, we're in a war, and then we kind of, by accident, took on leadership in this war. Yeah. And we've got some stories that may encourage some other people.
I hope so. We had talked, and there may be a future podcast on spiritual warfare.
Right.
Because we had talked about that as a possible topic for today. And I think putting on the armor is this is given away, the spiritual warfare podcast. You put on the armor.
Right.
That's how you defeat it. And I think have seen our share of that.
Oh, yeah. We're seeing it this week.
Yeah. And if you would have asked me, Tim, because you just brought scripture that I hadn't thought of at all for this podcast. And that's one of the things I love about you, is the way your brain works. It's a steel trap. I would have brought Count Your Blessings. That would have been it, right? Because I think that's another way to combat it.
Gratitude.
Is the gratitude. And one of the things that War Stories does is it's the remember when moments.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever, if you take a family trip, you're going to have a remember when moment. And it might be somebody puking in the back seat, whatever.
A flat tire.
Yeah. But there's those remember when. And that's what actually builds the family a little tighter.
The adversity?
Yeah. We go through, it isn't just all, roses.
Right.
It can be difficult at times. But, choosing to look back, I want to look back a little bit more at the blessing side.
Good.
I think is what I'm thinking. How about you?
Sure. Yeah. No,
Okay.
because that's, even when you said it's the adversity, the remember when moments.
Yeah.
Sometimes those moments break up a family or break up a relationship or break up a church.
Yeah.
Other times, the adversity, when in those other times you're able to stay together, then it becomes a remember when.
Yeah.
Because there's this, communal aspect of it.
Yeah.
But you started to talk about the fact that Indiana boy comes up here to the belly of the beast, but there's a Michigan boy that inside that man's body that had something in common. Neither one of us ever intended, nor did we want.
Yeah.
Leadership in church, I call us the accidental pastors.
Yeah, and that's the exact truth, because when I met you the first time, and I'm not going to go through the story the first time I came to church again.
Right.
But I came to church that first time to fulfill what I thought was the end of a bargain. Okay, I'll go once, and then I'm done with church, because Traverse City's too far away, and I'm not going back to that church. And not that church was bad; it was wonderful. But my attitude,
you weren't committed enough to travel that far, week in and week out.
Nope. And I was so excited about having Sunday back. Right, it was mine, which meant I would have, just flittered away at a time, had that been the case. But that literally was my mode for coming. Was number one, my wife will stop asking me to go to church. Number two, I won't ever have to go again. So talk about accidental.
Right.
There was a bona fide miracle that happened in that little firehouse over there, the ex-fire barn, whatever it is. It's now the food pantry, which is awesome. But there's a lot of memories from there.
That's right.
And that was, so when I came here, you were pushing the leadership at that time, which was the leaders I think that this church needed, because it was through a healing time. But you were pushing to grow, to try something different, because it was very evident this church was going to die, right? A couple more deaths, and there wouldn't have been anybody left, really, just little families, right? So you were pushing, and your brilliant idea was to have a service over in the firehouse and have us sit on the painful metal chairs.
It was just a change of scenery, really.
It was a change of scenery, but something happened, right? So what happened there?
Some of it had to do, like there was a change of scenery, but one of the things, as I was just interacting with humans in Buckley, Michigan, was I found out that there was a lot of people that were open to the idea of Jesus. They were open to the idea of church. In fact, they really kind of wanted to go, but they had so much baggage connected with the history of this church. And again, like you said, we don't want to go in throughout that story. You can go back to some of the very earliest podcasts and hear our story. And so it was like, okay, well, what if we hold a service in a different venue? And that's the time. And I think where you were going is one of the rare times that I was preaching was a weekend that you came.
Yeah, that's one of those miracles. That's one of those blessings of because that was not common.
Yeah, no, I was a youth pastor, and I was fine with that. I wasn't angling for a pulpit spot.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't even know what the topic was, and it doesn't even matter.
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah,
I know I came away a little PO'd because now something stirred.
Oh, because your plan didn't work.
Yeah, my plan didn't work, and I remember, saying to my wife, "Who is that guy? What is he doing in Buckley, Michigan? I don't understand this." Right, and I wanted to accuse my wife of tricking me, but she had no clue you were going to preach.
Yeah, she did.
She didn't have any idea, and I don't even know how well she knew you. She probably, I mean, my wife knows everybody.
Yeah, I probably met her.
Yeah, that was
before
probably about
then.
it. Yeah, that's probably about it. But at that time, the Firehouse Youth Group, it's now has a different name. What's its name now? Tom?
Foundry.
Oh,
Now it's a Foundry.
Yeah, it's a Foundry.
It's okay because you and I like change.
I know we do.
Yeah. But we're the Firehouse because we're meeting in the Firehouse.
Yeah, and it's a Firehouse because that was what it was at that time.
Right.
But you had a rockin' youth group going at that time, and
with very little help, meaning that I had no admin ability, and it was three of us with about 80 to 100 students.
So who was helping you?
I want to say that Beth Svek, Beth and Jason would come around. Jason when he was available.
Yeah.
The Pearsons,
when
they were available.
It was Ed and Marcy.
Yeah.
Pearson.
But they both had jobs. There were some other folks as well. But when you and Heidi showed up, like I was excited, and no offense to Heidi, I was excited to have more men around.
Yeah.
And, if we fast forward just a little bit, you and Heidi started to get involved in church, and you and Heidi specifically got involved with student ministry. And then on my side of things, the accidental pastor is in the back of my mind. Buckley was just a pit stop. Buckley was, we have young children, and we're going to live here for a while so my wife can get some help from her family. This is her hometown while I'm traveling and speaking. And if we forward a couple years later, now you and I have kind of forged a little bit of a relationship. We had that amazing, remember when youth staff outing during those first couple of years where we went down to Willow Creek to the belly of the beast.
Yeah.
Tim did not want to go.
Oh, I so didn't want to go.
But we just all went to this youth pastor conference with a couple thousand people. I think you and I were the only men on that trip.
Yeah.
And there was about 4 ladies.
Yep.
We had our room, they had their rooms. And something changed there.
Yeah.
Because when we say the belly of the beast, that's no slam on Willow Creek.
No.
That's no slam on other churches. Just you and I are both sons of pastors born and raised in the Christian ghetto. And some of those places, it's like, there's too many feelings here. I don't know if I want to be here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if it was going to be
Yeah.
a suit and tie type of a place, and I was just looking for a reason to bail. A lot of times it's like, I'm going to walk in and they're going to tell me your hair's too long, you smoke. Where's your tie?
You're too old.
What are you doing here? Whatever it was. And I remember walking up in this monstrous parking lot.
Oh, it's huge.
And I'm having like my last smoke before I go to the chair is kind of what it felt like,
The electric chair.
Yes. And as we walk up, and nobody looked sideways at me while I was walking up with a cigar, right? And I got up to the door, and I was going to stop and find a place, an appropriate place to put my cigar out and throw it away so I don't litter. And they had an ashtray, and they had a bench next to it, and there was absolutely zero no smoking signs. And it's like, holy crap, there's something different here, right? So, we're never going to be Willow Creek. We don't want to be Willow Creek. I don't even know what Willow Creek necessarily does today. That's not the point. The point is, they set in my heart in motion something could be different, right?
Yeah.
And so, when I said blessings, so right now if we just, stop and go back, it's like, okay, one of the blessings God gave was the first time I came to church, John was preaching, and that was very, very rare. So that wasn't just so happens.
And the blessing for me was the right people came on to help me.
Yeah.
Try to figure out this crazy idea. So that was a blessing, was meeting you guys.
Yeah, but the cool thing was you had a building that you had helped create, through your excitement and creativity and salesmanship to the community of, hey, let's refurb this old building. Because that became attractive to me. Here's this old building with crooked floors and it was a nasty old building.
Down
It was always cold with those
covered in soot.
Those 3 big garage doors. The wind always came through, right? But so that was unique, and you had something established there, right? And I saw growth happening because let's just be real. One of the blessings is we had a youth group that wasn't just 6 church kids
Mm-hmm.
sitting around in a paneled room
That's right.
trying to behave, right? Trying to wonder, well, what could we possibly do for fun? It was rock and roll. It was crazy. It was loud. There were every type of child, student,
That's
sorry,
right.
not child, that you can imagine, from like really mature Christians, kids really seeking, and kids just there because it's warm and they might get something to eat.
Right.
And it was a haven.
Or it's a Wednesday night in boring Buckley, and there's something to do.
Well, that was one of the secrets that we kind of kept between us for a while. We have a captive audience, don't we?
Yeah.
Because what are they going to do in Buckley? They're going to go bowling?
Cow tipping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go see a movie.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're not going to.
That's a commitment.
Really, it's like they're just all
flight to Traverse.
Yeah, the Buckley kids were, and this isn't a slam on Buckley kids, but this is kind of a joke that I was like, yeah, they're just waiting to turn 21 so they can go to the bar.
Exactly.
Because that's what you do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
In Buckley.
Yeah, but most of those kids weren't church kids. And
No.
that is something that enamored you, because it wasn't that you weren't okay with Jesus.
No.
It's like something about
It was the community
Yeah.
that claimed to be Christians that really I wanted to flee from.
Right.
I was such...
And wouldn't you say too, like feeling a part attached to the mission? Like, here's a mission now. There's something
well, absolutely,
besides existing.
Well, you were showing me, even though you had quite a ways, I needed to come and disturb your peace.
Oh, you did.
For a while.
Oh, we're gonna...
But, because that, I have this spidey sense about when somebody's real or not. And your enthusiasm for the mission was contagious to me in particular, right? And it wasn't contagious for the moment. It was contagious long term. It's like, I could commit to this, right? This is something I could go for. I finally met a man who I admire his skills and his gifts, that I desire to be friends with. But what he's selling, I'm buying, because it's not short term. It's long term. And I was tired of the mission trip highs of my previous experiences, right? I was tired of that. And then coming back and going, it's the same. It's the same. What do I do now? And there wasn't anything to do.
Right.
It's how I always felt.
Right.
That may not be true, but that was my feelings.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we go from there
I want you to take the accolades of, like, you had a rocking, because there was evenings where it was no big deal to have 70 kids.
Or we did a concert, we didn't have enough room.
Yeah.
Well over 120 or something.
Yeah. But that was something you built your vision, right? And sometimes we brush off the credit, and this isn't to like build you up so you get pride, because you were doing it for what reason?
For the Lord.
Yeah, you're doing it to get kids to understand who Jesus is. That's the whole purpose. But you were using something contemporary, right? Something that was culturally relevant. Now, it was a lower mark for us here in Buckley because we didn't have competition. There wasn't all these other events going on all of the time. So that part is true. But we had kids traveling from Kingsley, we had kids traveling from Mesick, from Copemish, from Thompsonville. We had kids traveling from all over the place to get here.
Right.
Because this was the happening.
Well, one of the things that you've taught me, one of the things you've taught me, I received that.
Yeah.
But now I want to show some gratitude for you.
Okay.
Because there were two things. There were two things that I'm remembering now as a 52-year-old grandpa, or Pop, as she calls me, that were hugely significant, that God brought with you and others. There were other leaders that jumped in there as well, men like Gary Lesperance, women like Christy Allen.
Todd and Kana were there.
Todd and Kana, Guernsey, a ton.
Yeah, and we're forgetting some.
Sorry if we're doing that. I mean, we had, and I just saw Brett Burns
He's
at
so cool.
O'Reilly Auto Parts last night, and he stopped his truck and helped me figure out the bolts on my daughter's license plate. He took 20 minutes, got the tool bag out, the whole deal. He
is one of my favorite humans still.
He's a great guy.
My nephew works with him now,
really?
So that's pretty cool. Anyways.
So during this time, still in the back of my mind, I've got a plan that I've blown in, we've blown something up, and now I'm going to blow out. Meaning I'm going to move to someplace warmer. I'm going to, there's still a whole lot of me that can see kind of the big picture, and I want it to happen fast. But with any ministry, there's a whole lot of groundwork or ground game that has to happen. And the first thing I remember is you and others getting really, really involved with helping students who are at risk, at crisis. Like I can remember you personally driving kids' homes or to their homes. Some brothers I'm thinking about right now who are in a really tough situation.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Yeah, and then getting your family involved. I remember one of your sons giving parts off of his bike.
Yeah, he built a bike for
exactly.
Yeah,
in order to build a bike.
Yep.
For a kid that was his mode of transportation.
Yep, that was how he's getting back for.
And so I was drawing a big crowd, but then when I would hear or have a conversation with you, and it's like, those kids right there that you just see as street kids and are just part of the crowd. I'm involved in their lives, and they're the children of alcoholics.
Yeah,
and that's a really jacked up situation. Is there a way we can help them? Or that was early on in the days of you counseling, not just students, but then it would turn into interventions where you're counseling parents. And it's like, that's not my gifting. That's not what I'm good at. But you were awakened to the needs, the real needs of the one-on-one and the one-on-two and the families that was teaching me. And that's really what started to give Firehouse or the student ministry at the Tabernacle was giving it real teeth. Like you were fighting those wars.
Yeah.
You were going house to house and door to door, where I'm up here just going, oh, what's the next hill? What's the next thing we can build? What's the next event? And you're doing some real life pastor stuff, So I was immensely grateful for that.
Yeah.
And what I saw, I had a moment, and I think you've forgiven me 19 years later or 18 years later. Somewhere in 2006, I'd come to the end of my commitment at the Tab, and I was gonna, my wife and I were actually starting to look at moving to a larger city. We were going to look at Indianapolis. We had family there. They have a big airport. There was opportunities. It was closer to the Charlotte, North Carolina that we'd come from and loved, And I specifically remember a meeting of the Firehouse staff, volunteer staff, in Ed and Marcy Pearson's living room. And I presented this thing of, look, you're all trained. You've been to Willow Creek training, for crying out loud, Tim. And really kind of had it in my mind that that you were the guy. And we had all of these staff people, so they don't need me. I can go away and I can pursue whatever concocted idea I had in my mind of self-importance and being this on-the-road itinerant forever. And at the end of that, everyone just kind of looked at me like, yeah, John, you're right. And I think what I presented was probably in the next 6 months to a year, Darcy and I are going to take our family. We're going to move. And you guys got this. And everyone was like, yeah, we got this. We got this. Except
me,
Tim Burgess. And I won't say your exact words, but it was pretty much, I call BS.
Yeah.
I call BS.
And you could hear a pin drop.
Yeah.
Because, and I'm like.
It was one of those Tim Burgess moments.
Yeah, because I'm just looking around the room and going, stop buying this, everybody.
Yeah.
Really?
And you said, I'm not buying it.
Yeah.
And you said something to the effect of, I think you're surrounded by yes people or yes men.
Yep.
I'm going to be a no man.
Yep. And
every time I get fired up about church, someone leaves. And you said, you're not leaving.
Yeah.
And I was like, crap. This isn't going well. And I don't remember what happened after that.
I don't either.
The rest was a blur.
Yeah, it just is. But I remember the feeling of abandonment, right? Was my very first feeling. And it's like I finally have a say, I think, right?
Right.
And my governor has gotten better over the years.
No, that was perfect.
But at that point in time, God
looking
used,
back, I'm grateful for that moment.
God used that.
Yes.
He used that part of my personality. And so he showed me, so if you really like break that whole moment down, that he can use me. And I had always felt so inadequate it's like, man, I got a temper and I smoke and I'm a, recovering dude. And, they've got all these negatives and I hate dressing up.
Mm.
Right.
But
And
you love Jesus. You love his word.
And all of these people that I'm working with, I just love to death. And this is so cool. And the kids, blah, blah, blah. But it was one of those senses, and this was after the fact, that I felt God say, no, I can use you. I can use you right where you're at right now. And I never felt worried you were going to leave. Isn't that weird? Because I honestly, if you would have left, I would have quit. So there, take that.
Well, what happened, in case you haven't heard my Change Life story, Tim's Change Life story, the fast version is that it was only a few months later that the lead pastor of the church at the time resigned, decided to go back into counseling, and I became the interim. Tim became the interim youth pastor, where he quit his job and was basically running the place for free, and I'm, trying to figure out how to come up with more than 3 sermons in a row where everyone gets saved on a Sunday morning. And within a year, both of us were full-time. And here, that's a gratitude thing, because when you said that, I didn't go, oh yeah, Tim, you're right. But it started something in my brain that then a month or month and a half later, when all of a sudden the church says, we want you to be the pastor, that gave me an open heart to it, because I didn't want it. I wasn't looking for it. But then all of a sudden, when it happened, we find ourselves these accidental pastors.
Yeah.
Where we're like you said, we scared everyone else off.
Yeah.
And somewhere, I think we took a ride in your truck or car or whatever. And it was like, we both felt like God said, okay, know-it-all preacher's kids, here's a church. You think you can do it better? Yeah. You run one.
I think in there he was saying, I have heard all of your complaints about church. Let's see if you can do better, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm not sure we have.
During that time, I had approached Heidi about leaving my job and just volunteering full time. And so I had a meeting with the man who is the current pastor at the tab, and said, hey, this is what I'm thinking of doing. Tell me, I just really need some advice. And he was like gung-ho, and this is incredible. This is awesome. And I didn't read between the lines, because it was 2 weeks later, after I quit my job, that he left. and that was part of the convo of you and I.
That's right.
In my little truck at that time, as we were cranking along, and that was the first time I ever saw you smoke.
That's right. I was like,
you were like, give me a cigar, Tim. I was like, here you go, you can have one. Because it was like, it wasn't that we were angry at anybody necessarily. I think we were just like shocked that this was happening. And suddenly when they came to you, and
that's right.
I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this going to be?
That was, I kind of miss those drives. I'm thinking of another drive, if we go to another war story. So now we've been doing this. Tim's got a great team. The firehouse is still kicking. I'm preaching on the weekends, and we're dreaming up big dreams. And again, we don't want to go into all the, the little things like we're going to paint this, we're going to knock down that wall, we're going to do this. But our services started to grow. And some of that had to do with the fact that students that we'd built trust with within the firehouse, whose maybe parents had also started to build trust with us. Now they were taking a risk, and they were coming to church. I think I'm full within the rights of to go ahead and say this. I'm thinking of one student. Her name was Haley. Her name it's Haley Cropin now. Haley started to come as a student, and then somewhere around that time convinced her parents to come and bring their little kids. Her mom is Tracy Romzik, who is now the Buckley campus administrator.
Yeah.
And Haley was just hired to be part of our Tab Kids leadership thing. But people like her are bringing their parents with them now, or parents, are kind of getting the word out. And so we've got a packed service on a weekend, and we're expanding to 2. But I'm remembering another ride where I had just had a conversation and was so frustrated with just disruptive people. There was some disruptive people that love to sit in the front row during a service, and during the message would carry on a full conversation with one another.
Yeah.
And it's a small sanctuary, here in T1. And then I'd had a convo with this person, and the person's complaint was, well, the reason we have a conversation is because church is too much like a monologue. And because of my studies in Jewish traditions, we think it should be more of a dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
The rabbi and the students, and I handled it badly. And I'm like, well, I'm not a rabbi, and Jesus came preaching and teaching. That was a monologue. So here it's going to be a monologue. It's not going to be a dialogue. If you want a dialogue, you need to join a small group.
Yeah.
And it just had this big deal. And Tim was like, hey, why don't you hop in the car?
Mm-hmm.
And that was the second time I had a smoke with you.
Yeah.
I was like, Tim, give me one of those.
Yeah.
And we drove all over this county. I don't even know where you took me on this long drive. And the gratitude is, that's where I needed your wisdom, your experience, having been in recovery, having been in counseling, having those conversations. I needed the older, wiser guy just to let me vent.
Yep.
It was about 45 minutes of venting. And all you did was listen and ask questions like, okay, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so what did we learn?
Mm-hmm.
And
then what's next?
It wasn't until later that I realized, oh, he was coaching me up there.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you remember that one.
I do.
Dealing with difficult people, man.
I can remember, and this is one that we didn't deal with, but just another member one story. And this will probably happen in the next few weeks.
Oh, yeah.
Again, but cell phones were relatively new. And there was a lady who would sit towards the front, and she would come by herself, and her phone rang. And so she answers it in churches.
Yeah.
And
on the first or second row of church.
Yeah. And then she hangs up and puts it down, and 30 seconds later it rings again, but she lets it ring like 5 times. And finally somebody in the audience said, answer it, which was hilarious. And so she picked up and had another dialogue that lasted about 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Finishing with, I can't believe how dumb you are. I'm in church, and hung up. And you were preaching at that time. It was there. So
welcome to Bucktuck.
Yeah, it really was. And that's very endearing, because I don't want our church to ever become a place where like everybody knows exactly how to act when you're in a service.
Right.
Because we had at that time something that we're missing now is we had a higher percentage of people who had never been in church.
Yeah. They don't know how to act. They didn't know how to dress,
clue.
when to stand, when to sit, what the words were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why would you do that? Yeah.
Right.
I mean, absolutely total pagans coming in, which was a high desire of ours to have that happen. And the thing that I think God really blessed us with it at that time is that we kept the decorum.
Right.
That we kept without shaming.
Right.
Right. Because it would have been so easy.
Right.
To ruin that person's experience rather than having it be kind of a funny story,
right?
15, 18 years later, whatever it is. I think God blessed us because there was times you talked me off the ledge. And because once in a while, I mean, it's very rare that you would see me kind of like say what's on my mind. Right. And I can remember.
Was that an understatement?
Yes, that was.
Yeah. Sarcasm. Yeah.
That's the word.
Yeah.
But I remember sitting in board meetings, and God had the board who he needed at that time, and they wanted to grow. But their experiences pre us were very difficult.
And it limited.
Yes. They were very limited in a whole lot of things. And, I don't have no idea what the topic was, but I was going to speak, and you could see my body language. And you had
you were going to go off.
I was going to go off, and
because what was said, and it doesn't even matter what was said or who said it. It was so off base.
Yeah.
And sorry, I want you to keep your train of thought, but this was an example of spiritual warfare where sometimes the enemy can use the words of well-meaning people.
Mm-hmm.
And it was off of the mission of, no, we're here to make disciples, and it's about the weekend, and it's about worship and the gathering, and whatever it was going to put us back. And so Tim was going to defend that with righteous anger.
Yeah,
like you were ready to go off.
And I was. And, and I recognized that the person, what they were saying was a fear-based statement.
Yes.
And there was reason to fear at times. I mean, it wasn't like you and I had a track record of doing stupid things too, But, I remember as I'm ready to go off, John had that previous Christmas got Heidi and I cell phones. That was my first cell phone. And I've hated you ever since for cell phones.
I feel guilty
but
about
he
it.
texted me. And this was back with the T9
You're across
text.
the table.
Yeah. But that was T9.
Yeah.
So, the multiple clicks on each number. And that it just came across as like, relax, I've got this. And so I sat back and you dealt with it with passion, but it was really well spoken, and it was something that the other person could hear, because mine would have just caused damage in a relationship. Because it probably would have been more shaming towards that person. And that was an area God really needed to teach me how to grow. So that's one of those blessings of having you on my side, during that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's and that's it. It's interesting to me, the different, because I've heard you tell that story, and these are exactly the stories that we wanted to talk about, is those little things that maybe not everyone saw, because people know. I mean, if you've been around the church as long as we have, it was shortly after that or around that time where we're running out of space.
Yeah.
And so neither one of us wanted to build anything. We'd seen building programs. And so we added a service, but then we didn't want to add a third service. So then, we tried things like, well, let's meet in the gym could we rent the gym, the holy ground of Buckley High School, the Buckley, the hardwood. Could we do a multi-site? Could we hold a service in the Music gym? Could we use technology? And some of those worked, some of those didn't work. But through all of that, I watched how God was training us, preparing us for a future that we had no clue.
No.
Like, we didn't have some master plan 15 years ago that we were going to have a campus in Manistee that we're live streaming the sermon to every week, and we're about to launch one in Cadillac. We were just kind of making it up as we go along.
Yeah.
But at any one of these behind-the-scenes moments, we could have done damage to one another or to our board or the board with us, and that whole thing could have it could have ended. They could have said, you know what, we want guys with seminary degrees that wear suits and ties. We want to go back to the way that it was.
Yeah.
But somehow, God kept giving us these little victories, and the victories were people's lives being changed.
I remember the first meeting that I went to where it was the congregation, right? And,
oh, yeah.
So
annual meeting.
We're at this annual meeting thing, and Heidi and I are going, and I don't even know why I'm there, because we're not even members. And I was in a membership class, and I remember reading one line in there about what you can't do if you want to be a member. And I looked over at Heidi and said, well, dang, I can't become a member because I do 2 out of 3 of these. And it was, you can't drink, you can't smoke, and you can't swear. And it's like, I gave up drinking. I'm not giving up the other
Smoking.
So I wasn't even a member.
2 out of 3 ain't bad.
Yeah, I know. I wasn't even a member. And they asked us, and we ended up in this group with some really amazing people that are still here today. And they're like, Tim, will you lead this? And I wasn't even at the firehouse yet, and
Right.
It's like, okay. So I'm with this group, and we began discussing, and I'm like just blown away. Like, here's all of these older people. Because there wasn't anybody. Heidi and I were the youngest in there. And it's like the point of the meeting was growth. And the desire around the room at that time, because we were small still, was, please, God, let us grow. we want to see, and it is an old-timey word, but it was like, we want a revival. We want a revival at the tabernacle. We want a revival in our community. And they were so for it that the congregation took a boatload of risks with you and I. And, so how did God prepare their hearts for that? I mean, you talk about another blessing, because they had been burned several times, and they were feeling it. And yet their heart was, no, God has a purpose with this church. What is it going to be? We've been faithful all this time. What are you going to do, God? And that's the basis of, how this all began, was that type of backing from the congregation. So we might laugh about some things and, whatever.
Right.
That part's fine. But, suddenly when we went to, didn't we go to the gym here in Buckley first and then Mesick?
Yeah.
So
I believe so.
The biggest supporters for both of those was the elders of the church.
That's right.
Those were the supporters. The naysayers were the young ones who might have to do some work.
Right.
And eventually we did. So we did the gym for quite a while. I don't have a lot of fond memories of that.
No, it was hard work.
Yeah, and the same with Mesick. I do remember preaching here, getting in the car and speeding all the way.
Yeah.
Breaking the law so I could go preach another sermon down in Mesick.
You'd have to walk off the stage in Buckley, out the back door, into a vehicle, and get straight to Mesick. They would be singing already,
and you would
stand up and preach again.
You would put on a headset and walk up on stage and preach again.
That's right.
And that it was great. That built the
we
Mesick
learned a lot.
Oh, we learned a ton.
And we made some new friends.
Yeah, we did.
But we were taking territory for the Lord, not for the tab, for the Lord. We're meeting new people.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I want to go back to something you said, that old-timey word where people were praying for revival.
Yes.
And what we didn't realize is we were in the midst of one.
Uh-huh.
I had someone call me from Indiana, northern Indiana, who had heard a sermon or was one of our online listeners and heard us reference a slow burn revival that's been going on for 13 years, or for 19 years, sorry, and wanted to know how they could bring that to their church. And they're in the middle of a pastor search. And so it was a blessing to be able to say, well, these are the things that we did right, I think, and that it kind of helped us in our spiritual warfare, both for our own souls and for the souls of the people we love and the people in this community. But it's interesting to me that we didn't realize it at the time.
Right, in the midst of it.
Yeah, that we were in the midst of it, that every face, that's a revival. I think sometimes the church is looking for this big emotional event where, snap of a finger, just like rubbing the side of a genie lamp, and the genie comes out and gives you the big church with all the right people and the change lives, change marriages, and all that. And they miss the fact that this warfare is one soul at a time, one family at a time, one marriage at a time, one person freed from addiction at a time.
Yes.
One person who decides to forget the girlfriend and go and make his marriage and better and be the dad that he's supposed to be, and shut up, follow Jesus, obey what he says. And it's looking back that we realize, oh, this has been a revival.
Yeah.
Because now it's like, some of the things I think I could share with that person from Indiana that we did right, but some of it was it was all God. Yeah. But most of it, we were just trying to figure it out.
Yeah. If Jesus was, alive today, and he's telling parables, right? And he would go, let me tell you a parable about the two jackasses from Buckley that we use for the kingdom, right? And this is the miracle God did. And that really is the essence of the story. And that's not to denigrate or say that, we don't have talent or any of that. We're not looking for compliments. That's just the plain truth. Right. Because in the midst of that, sometimes I would almost feel guilty of people kind of assume that we had some master plan.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're winging it.
Yeah.
We're listening to what we think the Spirit's saying. But, how many times we were wrong is how many times we've had to apologize.
Right.
And when we apologize, it's not just to our spouses.
Right.
Right.
Sometimes it's the whole church.
Yeah, it's public.
Hey, we got that one wrong.
Yeah, we were saying we're going to go south when God really was telling us to go north.
Right.
But He's also a gracious God.
Right.
And if we go to who God started bringing up here to, some of the early staff moves, and we're getting bigger and it's happening faster, and those are all good things. But I remember there was a guy that you had met on one of your speaking engagements, and you had formed some type of a relationship with him, and in your own way, and now you don't do this anymore, but you would kind of make promises to somebody in the midst of firing them up. And so this foreign exchange student named Zach from down south, just a little ways.
The senior pastor.
Yep. Yeah. And Zach gave you a call and said, "Hey, were you just playing with me, blowing smoke? Telling me a story, or was your offer for real? Because I want to come up."
He says, "Hey, is there really an internship, or were you just being nice to me?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh,
what do I do now?
Let's make an internship."
Yeah.
And so he spend a summer with us, and he lived in your.
He was in my garage.
In your garage,
yeah. Which I have a really nice section of the garage, so he didn't sleep amongst the cars.
Yeah. So he spent a summer before his senior year, and God used him, and I think there was something in us that really attracted him.
Yeah. Because
when he graduated, we ended up hiring the guy as your replacement.
Yep.
Yeah. That's right.
He was my replacement, and he was very young, very enthusiastic, incredibly well-read and intelligent.
Yeah.
Really knew Scripture inside and out, had a really dynamic faith, and yet he was young.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite memories is we had a picture for a long time of him doing a cannonball from Bob and Mary Wilson's
at the baptism.
At the baptism, at the end, and all of the kids following him, and and at that time it's like, okay, we got our guy. He'll be here forever.
Yeah.
And do you know where Zach is now?
He's in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Yeah, he's pastoring at a church in Pennsylvania. But yeah, that was one of those deals where we kind of fell into that. But we he not only had a great ministry here with students in a different way than
us.
I or you would have done, but that's not a slam.
No.
Because he was more about growing deeper in relationships with students, and there was a real unique set of students that were attracted that might have not have been attracted if I was there or you were there. And he was a part of our staff, and he got married, had his first kid here, and then felt like God was calling him back to seminary.
Yeah. I had established a really fond relationship with Zach and Melissa as well, his wife. But when it was before Melissa, before they were married, they were boyfriend and girlfriend. She lived downstate. And Zach and I would go out. I'd buy him lunch at Main Street usually at that time. Main Street or patty cakes, it didn't really matter. But we happened to be at Main Street. And so our food comes. And Zach says to me, "Hey, let's pray real quick." I was like, okay. So we pray before we eat food because that's what you do, right? And then he goes, "Oh, man, I'll be right back. I got to go to the back. I got to go take a leak," is what he said. And I said, "So you're going to take a leak real quick?" And then he went, and then he came back and he goes, "That was brilliant." He said, "I've been thinking about that, and a leak is as long as it needs to be. So why do we say pray real quick?" And we had this long, 2-week discussion that lasted 2 weeks about, let's pray real quick. Well, what if we pray for as long as it's necessary?
I remember you guys bringing that back to staff meeting.
Yeah.
It was like that's a eureka theological moment that happened at Main Street Cafe.
Yeah.
That two people that otherwise would never have known each other.
No, we were as different
That's
as
influenced
possible.
the culture of our church.
Yeah.
Now we call BS on someone that goes, "Hey, let's pray real quick."
Yeah.
And then it's like, "Oh, you said real quick. We pray as long as it needs to be."
And another one time coming back, somebody else was with us, and there used to be the huge tree out front of T1, and that has been cut down in just the last year or so. But it was surrounded by yellow flowers. I don't know what kind they were, but they were big yellow flowers. And we're walking up, and I have no reason why I said it. Says, Zach, just go kick that flower as hard as you can. And he ran up, and he was going to just boot that thing. And as his left plant foot hit, it just went right out from under him, and he landed right on his back. And it took us probably 45 minutes for the three of us to be able to make it in the building. And that's only 50,
so hard.
Yes, it was only 15 feet away from the door, and we laughed so hard. So stupid stuff happens too with that. But
well, this has reminded me that one of the things that in conversations that we'll have with people over the years, and it continues to this day, even though now we've got 2 campuses, we're looking at a third, we've somehow, it's a whole podcast in itself of the miracle that is T2.
Yes.
Because, how through much sacrifice, much giving, we were able to get land and build on our parking lot, and then a grant that was a miracle of God, and another random, Matt Luce, and he's not a random person. I'm just saying random how he ended up in Buckley, where he and his wife came to Buckley, and we tried to talk him out of it. Yeah. And then God uses him to write the grant that got more than half of that building paid for. Mm-hmm. But through all these years, we'll ask somebody, what is it about the tabernacle that made you decide to drive this far? Or what is it about the tabernacle that has attracted you here? And there's all different things that they'll say, but the one common thread that we hear is this word authentic, that it just feels authentic here. It's usually, hey, we just like, sermons that are straight from the Bible. We're teaching and preaching the Bible. We keep it simple. We're focusing on little things. Or they might love the band, and we've got great bands at both campuses and great worship leaders. Or they might love the student ministry or the kids ministry. And now we've got for real youth pastors that are crushing it, Mm-hmm. But the one common thread is this word authentic. And I don't know that now, I don't know if there's any other way to be, but I'm grateful because listening to you, I realize you've been the one from the beginning that's helped us be real and be authentic. Now, others might look at Tim Burgess and go irreverent because you can be really irreverent. And so can I.
Yeah.
But
I have less of a governor.
You have less of a governor.
Yeah.
But it's helped create this culture where I think it was Pastor Brian Williams who was on our staff for years and now has just recently moved to California to be on staff at a church out there. But he used to say the tabernacle is not polished wood. We're rough-cut lumber. Mm-hmm. And we're fighting to stay that way. Yeah. Because as you get bigger, it's easy to become more organizational and forget that we're an organism, that authenticity is really the secret sauce. So was that on purpose, Tim, or is that just...
That is, for me, that's been on purpose. I learned a long time ago in how much time we got, bud? We're about done? Okay.
At least for War Stories Part 1.
Yeah, the end. No, not the end yet. So anyways, I learned a long time ago in reading, and, mine isn't going to be some Philip Yancey book. It was a Kurt Vonnegut book. And one of the things I learned from Vonnegut, he's a realist. He tells, really fantastical stories, but they're insanely simple and very short sentences. And his one of his characters, Kilgore Trout, had a saying, so it goes, so it goes, so it goes. And that's something I've used, for 35 years probably, so it goes. And part of that, what that means to me, isn't that we're just pawns, right? And that we have no control. That's not the implication of it. The implication of it, for me, was stop taking yourself so seriously, right? So if God really does have this and he's going to use me, he also knows that part of me, that's going to be it. And I used to frustrate the heck out of you, and you have grown to embrace this, but we would have a meeting. And our meetings always go long. We always talk too much. But We use the meetings for, a variety of reasons. And I would stop before I'd go, John, just wait a minute. I didn't know how everybody's doing. Tell me where you're at, what's going on.
That used to frustrate me so much.
I know. And it would be like, I could see.
We got this big agenda. We got all these things to talk about.
Yeah. And I would say, that's a really important thing, but we need to go here. Today, that has become...
It's part of the culture.
Part of the culture. And it isn't like, sometimes in this business of how do we run this church, feelings really don't matter, right? It's like, I understand that, but it's Sunday morning, right? And we'll talk about your feelings on Monday morning.
Right.
But then we've built into the culture of, and it scares some people that come and work for us, that we really care about you.
How's your marriage?
And
how's your kids?
We're your advocates, and we know what this job can do to people, and it can chew them up and spit them out. And it, even with your best intentions, it can do that. So we have to help set boundaries. And, I remember the Tuesday of Terror, right? Remember when, right? War story. So Tuesday of Terror. Was it?
It's a staff meeting in my basement.
Yeah, it was. And it was, what book was that? The Five Dysfunctions of a Teen.
Yeah.
And there was a point where we needed to go around and share something about somebody else. And I don't remember. It was positive,
I think
negative.
what it was what's the best thing that you bring to this team?
Yeah.
And then we had to all go around. I went first. And the second thing was, what's one thing that holds this team back?
Yeah.
And everyone had to put their cell phone in a basket upstairs.
Yes. And it was the first time I realized how I admire Brian Williams so much. But I saw into him that day, as we all did, because I watched him literally turn pale and his hand shake. And he would have rather been getting a root canal with no anesthesia at all than be in that room. It was that uncomfortable for him. He embraced it later, and it's become part of his culture. And I think that goes to the authenticity that you were talking about, right?
Yeah,
is how can you be authentic from stage if you can't be authentic with your fellow laborers?
Yeah,
right. And so when we're down here, Benjamin gets to see, excuse me, pre-recording a little bit of who I am, not who I am on stage. He gets the benefit to see that, and I might be a little irreverent or silly or whatever. But he's also heard from my heart, from the stage,
right,
what my commitment to Jesus is, and Jesus' commitment to me, more importantly, right? So we have to be able to be authentic with our staff, with our spouse, before you can be. You can't just turn authenticity on.
Right.
It's either in you or it isn't. And when it isn't, it's almost always self-protection. It isn't because you're dumb or bad or any of that stuff. It's like, no, there's this fear. And you and I have been like, well, what are they going to do if they know this about us? They already know it because we've said it from stage how many times, right?
And on staff, they know even more.
Yeah, we would both be, we'd probably both be dead if it wasn't for our wives, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that just is the importance of that, because you and I just don't have it together.
Right. We
are flawed critters. We're the king of the misfit toys. We just are. Yet our commitment is sincere, and our commitment to each other is also sincere.
Right.
And I don't want that to sound weird or creepy, but it's dynamic.
Right.
I've never been in a position where I've had somebody that I can call a friend, that's also my boss, that I know would drop everything, if earthly possible, to help me or my family. And that's really priceless. And that's because we have 19 years together. Right.
Well, I think what you're speaking to also is authenticity starts, or at least a culture, it starts with leadership and it trickles into the church. And what I'm hearing you remind our listeners, that your church staff is not just people doing a job. We're not just a restaurant with waiters and a cook and dishwashers that are just here so we can just drive up, get our meal on a weekend, and leave, is these are people that genuinely are caring for one another, pushed into relationship with one another, are real with one another, so that can flow. And I don't know now of any other way to do it.
I can't imagine.
I can't imagine just going to a different place that had a different culture. And there's great risk in it. You and I have paid. I mean, speaking of spiritual warfare, when a staff person leaves, it hurts. When a staff person leaves mad, or under not the best circumstance, it can be devastating. And it's the same thing with people in our church. Now, there's a certain amount of detachment that we have to do. We have to fix our eyes on Jesus. We have to know what our calling is and what we're a part of. But it's a risk. It's a huge risk to be real and to genuinely love my neighbor, including those on staff, as I love myself, and enter into that relationship. And like you said, for some people, it's really difficult. But there's also people that have been on our staff that have left and have said, man, I just miss that because I don't have it where I'm at. I'm going crazy where I'm at. And I think that authentic piece, when we're just putting on, like if we ever get to a place where we're just putting on a ministry, or we're just putting on a show, I hope that God either strikes us dead or just takes us out of it.
Just take, and I want Him to take us out in a kind way.
It's the real deal. Just can it not hurt so bad?
Exactly. Yeah, and so the war stories, and we could continue this for hours.
Well, this might just be War Stories Part 1.
And I'm just I want to remind you and me and vicariously anybody happen to listen that it has nothing to do with our genius. It has nothing to do with our master plan. And
has nothing to do with trying to be cool.
Right.
Because there's a lot of people like, oh, this church is so cool. And I appreciate that. But we're not trying to be cool.
Do you know that I dressed this way when I was 14 and I've never changed? Okay.
You just waited long enough that it was cool?
I guess it came back, No, but I hear that because that's not the goal. Because to be cool, if you think of how fast trends change around here, we would never be able to keep up.
No, you can't keep up with the world.
And, when we were sitting down and going, okay, what are we going to do? I remember sitting at a table in the sanctuary of T1. And, it was an 8-person rectangle table, and it was just you and I. And we sat down, and you had a pad of paper, and we were writing out things. And one of them was, we want to be biblically conservative and culturally relevant.
That's right.
And so it was never culturally liberal. It was culturally relevant. And that even now would probably need more definition.
Right.
If we were going to do it again. But we want it to be known by what we're for, not what we're against. And so those were some of the things that we saw in other churches that we disagreed with. Like, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do that. It's like,
all the stuff you're
no.
against.
They're like, what are we for? And I think that was Holy Spirit inspired. It took some of our angst from our previous experiences, younger men and boys, and brought them into a real positive light and kind of guiding us, saying, this is what we could do. Even, the mission and vision statement, just keeping it super simple.
Right.
And let's not overcomplicate this. What are we doing? And, even a little bit later, there was some influences for us. And some of them we knew, and some of them we read or listened to online that we never met. But I don't know if it was Andy Stanley that talked about vision leaks.
Yeah.
And I was so confused about that for the first 6 months until I started to really realize what that meant. And it's like vision is, it continues. We fill up somebody's vision bucket or our staff or the church.
And they get fired up and they go
and
hard after it.
Everybody's bucket has a leak. And we don't need to fire them up with a new vision. We need to go back and refill the bucket with the same vision.
That's right.
Because that's evidence of why God wants us to do what we're doing with a church, is that's where people come and get their bucket filled, right? And I remember that just becoming such a profound part of what we do.
Yeah, because decades later, we're still talking about that. Those two words, vision leaks.
Yeah, and the beauty of that for me was how that became very simplistic. Now, right now we're doing, it's not necessarily a topical series called I Am. It has a purpose, and it's leading up to Easter. And after that, we have one coming out called We Believe.
Or This We Believe.
This We Believe, thank you. And then we'll go back
to just right through the Bible.
To the Bible. And that's been our mainstay. So we're keeping it very simple. It seems good to us that that's what God wants us to do, is just continue to go through His Word. And there's enough there that we could do it all the way to the end of our lives, turn it over to the next pastors of the tabernacle, and they can carry it and keep doing it. And they're not going to, it's not going to be repetitive.
Yeah. There's another one I'm thinking of now that you said that. It was another one of those online guys that we heard, and it wasn't Andy Stanley. I don't want to say his name because I want to describe him.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be nice, but he was super tan, super well dressed, probably a church I would never go to, and just because it was all the stuff we're trying not to be. Like, you wouldn't be welcome there in a hoodie.
Yeah.
But he was super cool, super tanned, and super excited. He had these teeth, these perfect white veneer teeth that were bigger than the rest of the things on his face, you know?
Yeah.
But we learned from this guy, in leading a church, he said, it's about the weekend, stupid. And he was playing off that thing, KISS, keep it simple, stupid.
Yep.
But he was talking to pastors, and for you and I, that was freeing because, and especially you, I think, because at that time I was still preaching, but then I would be on the road preaching as well. And so Tim had to hold down the fort. He's the youth / associate / executive. And people were bombarding with you where I want to do quilting. I want to do skating. I want to do this ministry. Sorry, this is what I want. None of them wanted to do it. They wanted you to do it. Tim, will you provide a quilting thing? Would you provide a skating bee? Yeah, I've got this great idea for you to do. Everyone had all these great ideas for what they wanted the church to do. And it was hard to know where to say no. And then this guy goes, it's about the weekend, stupid, which it doesn't mean there can't be other ministries throughout the week. What he was trying to say is the main focus is the gathering. Put the majority of your time, energy, money, focus right there. And that's something that has stayed. Yes, God has blessed us with other ministries, but I'm so grateful for Veneer White Teeth Guy, because that little statement became something that guided us. It's about the weekend, stupid, meaning don't be stupid by chasing all these other things.
Yeah.
And let's make that our focus, which we have.
Yeah, because that, we could have 20 pastors on staff very easily for each ministry.
Or for every demographic and gender, race.
So I think that's a great place to land that is
vision leaks.
And sometimes in the midst of this, we needed somebody to call us stupid and say, no, you're trying too hard. Go back to how God wired you.
Right.
This is what He chose you to do. Do it.
Yeah.
And He's blessed it. I think about the weekend and just how many great volunteers we've had through the course of, all of the people who have worked in nursery.
Yeah, sound guys.
How many diapers have been changed? How many musicians have come and gone? And we've always had high-level talent. It's been incredible. I have had so many people say, what is it about Buckley? How do you get so many great musicians down here? And it's like, we have no clue.
But we're blessed.
Yeah,
and we're grateful.
Yeah.
And we're just going to keep doing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Tab family, that's a little bit of how we got here. Tim, I'm thinking that we should probably do another one.
Yeah. Let me know when.
I think it might be cool to bring Heidi here because I don't know about you. They remember way more than we do.
I know. Could we get Darcy here too?
That would be a stretch.
Okay.
Maybe if you asked her.
Maybe I'll ask her.
Or maybe if the Tab family or those that listen to the podcast, maybe message my wife and just use your powers. Because if I ask her, it's not happening.
Okay.
Not because she's stubborn. Well,
yes, she is.
Yeah, but
she's
just
a little stubborn, and
it'll come better from you guys.
It's a beautiful trait that she has.
Yeah, some war stories. If she were to share some war stories, and Heidi, oh my goodness, we'd just get out of the way and listen.
I think so. And with Darcy, if she were on here, we'd probably have to put a little rating thing. because she might, I don't know.
She might go toe-to-toe with Tim.
Yeah, there we go.
We're not sure.
Hey, thanks. This was fun.
Tim, I am grateful to you. I'm grateful to God. I'm grateful to Heidi, to Darcy. We've been riding a wave that we're grateful for. And I think the older we get, the more of a miracle it seems, not because that we're still around, but the fact that God used two misfits, two jackasses, as you said, that we do take the job, the calling very seriously, but we still don't feel up to the task or that we're worthy because we're not. But that's why we can elevate Jesus and say it's about him, it's not about us, and we're the proof. So, yeah. You got anything else before we kick off?
Thanks for being our studio head there, Benjamin.
Yeah, he's given us the sign. So that's it. Tabernacle family, you know what to do. We'd love for you to share it. Thanks for listening to these war stories. Maybe if we can, we'll do a part 2, and we'll give you, because that was probably maybe the first 7, 8, 9, 10 years with a little other things. We didn't even talk about staff meetings in the bar. We didn't talk about paintball at Tim's house on his property where it became a war zone with hot dogs. We didn't talk about Tim at Big Ticket, backstage at music festivals, and just the random places that God has taken us. But until next time, this is Tim, Benjamin, and John signing off.